Hey, Joe, I'm glad to see that you're not letting your education get in the way of your ignorance. Good morning. It is Friday, September the 16th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the daily declaration for spiritual warfare and the Pledge of Allegiance and Star Spangled Banner, we'll have no free lunch, holier-than-thou, liberal hypocrisy, Kamala Harris, pointing fingers, rhetoric as a weapon, Governor Ron DeSantis, keep your mouth shut, more Ron DeSantis, news snippets, and it's a commencement speech by dr-kreeft. Back. All that and more when I come back. Thank you. And now, the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare, Biblical Principles to Defeat the Devil. Lord, bless me as I dwell in your house and continue to praise you. I trust in you, and my hope is in you. Prepare a place in your presence where I can dwell forever. I will not be troubled or afraid, for I know that you will come back for me, and you will take me with you to live forever in your eternal home. Amen. And that was the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for September the 16th. Thank you. Why am I the only true conservative in the United States today? Because I'm the only person in the United States of America that knows that the government has no rights. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now there is no free lunch. Quote, if government resorts to inflation, that is, creates money in order to cover its budget deficits or expands credit in order to stimulate business, then no power on earth, no gimmick, device, trick, or even indexation can prevent its economic consequences, unquote. Henry Hazlitt. There's no free lunch indeed. The idea that any government can make money ex nihilo is just as much wishful thinking as the idea that a government can spend money without restraint, without consequence. Pick your poison, but whether it be price inflation, misallocation of resources, the bursting of an asset bubble, or generational suppression of growth, or perhaps some combination of multiple items on this list, they are unavoidable. And that was There's No Free Lunch. Back in a minute.
Thank you. What is the true conservatives' strategy for defeating the left? True conservatives must take the Democrats' issues away from them. True conservatives must convince the country that they are the party of gun control, feminism, environmentalism, and racial diversity. To win, the true conservative must fight to own the left's issues. The left claims that there exists left-wing issues and right-wing issues. Wrong. The left claims women's rights, the environment, civil rights, racial and sexual, labor, and poverty as their issues. Wrong. If true conservatives are allowed the left to define political positions, they will never win. True conservatives must fight for all political constituencies if they hope to survive and thrive. To fight and win these battles, we must appeal to people's natural conservative tendencies. The true conservative is the true feminist, true environmentalist, true civil rights champion, and true friend to labor and the poor, because that's the way it is. We respect the independence of the individual, regardless of who they are, while the left demands fealty and obedience.
Thank you. So what's really interesting about the border situation where people are being sent to other places is the liberal reactions. The liberals are trying to find some kind of a psychological, emotional hook in which to be able to shame the Republicans. They've gone so far as to suggest that it's RICO. It's part of a crime syndicate that they've said that it's trafficking. That's what Hillary Clinton wants to call it. That's some kind of trafficking. The press secretary for Joe Biden says that it's dangerous for the children. But none of this holds water. It's not getting what the left calls traction. And the reason it isn't psychologically or intellectually is simple, because the left has shot themselves in the foot. This is something that's backfired. Things always backfire on the left. And the reason it's backfired is because they're the ones that shot their mouths off, ran around bragging to everybody about how they are more compassionate than anyone else and that they're welcoming everybody and etc. So it's the only way they can win on this issue is for them to simply accept illegal immigrants with a smile on their face. If I was them, then what I would do is I would say, hey, Mr. DeSantis and Mr. Abbott, please go ahead and send us your illegal aliens, because we're going to show you the proper way to take care of these folks. Okay, and then in the meantime, what you can do is, if you're strapped for resources, you go to the federal government. Your buddy Joe Biden works in the White House, so you just go to Joe and get him to marshal the resources to be able to help you out with this. So, but that's the only way they can win on this issue, is if they accept the fact that is to be holier than thou. Let's put it that way. Be holier than thou. Say, send them, and we will show you how to properly deal with illegal immigrants. And that's their only way out. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now an article from the Washington Examiner. Liberals finally discover illegal immigration is a humanitarian crisis. Democrats and liberal pundits are wailing over GOP Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' sending about 50 illegal immigrants to Martha's Vineyards in Massachusetts. But they still can't explain why sending illegal immigrants to accepting liberal areas is so cruel. Senator Elizabeth Warren said her state is, quote, fully capable of handling asylum seekers, unquote. And State Rep Dylan Fernandez showcased how the island was giving illegal immigrants beds, food, a play area for children, and, quote, the health care and support they need, unquote. Massachusetts is a sanctuary state, and Martha's Vineyard does not comply with voluntary detainers from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Both Warren and Fernandez claim the state and Martha's Vineyard can care for the illegal immigrants that are arriving. So, what's the problem? According to Elizabeth Warren, quote from a tweet, exploiting vulnerable people for political stunts is repulsive and cruel. Massachusetts is fully capable of handling asylum seekers, and I'll keep working with local, state, and federal partners to ensure we have the necessary resources to care for people with dignity. Dylan Fernandez, our island jumped into action, putting together 50 beds, giving everyone a good meal, providing a play area for the children, making sure people have the health care and support they need. We're a community that comes together to support migrants. Is it that DeSantis and Texas Governor Greg Abbott are sending illegal immigrants to communities without warning? This didn't seem to be an issue when President Joe Biden was sending them to Iowa and Indiana, or when the administration was busing them to various towns in Texas. Others are claiming that DeSantis and Abbott are using people as political pawns. But if they're sending illegal immigrants to places that have promised to care for them and have the resources to do so, then why is that such a big deal? Democrats were decrying border detention facilities as cages and concentration camps just a few years ago. If using illegal immigrants as political pawns gets them out of those facilities and into sanctuary states and cities, why is that so bad? The reality is that Martha's Vineyard, like Chicago, New York City, and Washington, D.C., cannot handle a few hundred or even a few dozen illegal immigrants. Despite Warren and Fernandez's putting on a brave face, the 50 illegal immigrants that Florida sent to Martha's Vineyard are already an, quote, urgent humanitarian situation, unquote. And other Democratic cities have already complained of humanitarian crises. Do you know what may be more of a crisis than a liberal area receiving a few hundred illegal immigrants? How about 8,000 illegal immigrants crossing the border every single day? Meanwhile, just over 2,000 illegal immigrants have brought New York City to its breaking point, according to Mayor Eric Adams, and the governor of Illinois has called on the National Guard to help with just 500 entering his sanctuary state. After just a few months, these legal liberal sanctuaries are straining under a fraction of what border towns have been experiencing for years. This is already a humanitarian crisis. Liberals are only just now being made to notice. Being a sanctuary and shaming those mean Republicans for not accepting illegal immigrants is all fun and games when they're pouring over the red border states. Those promises of sanctuary are great when you aren't the ones dealing with the thousands of illegal immigrants straining your resources every single day. Democrats and liberal pundits are upset because now they are being forced to look a crisis of their own making in the eyes, and they don't like the result. And that was an article in the Washington Examiner. Back in a minute.
And now Fox News.
And this morning, ending up at Kamala Harris's home. Now, she just went on record last week twice saying the border's secure. Well, all she has to do is walk down to where Griff Jenkins is and talk to the people on the sidewalk there, and they'll tell her the same thing they told Griff. They came because the border was open. They simply walk across, so it wasn't secure. And actually, one migrant thanked President Biden. So there, case closed, Vice President Harris. There's your underlying reasons. There's your core reasons for this immigration crisis. They'll tell you right on the sidewalk of Griff. It's because of Biden's open border policy.
And that was Fox News. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now Newsmax.
Well, it's easy for him to point fingers at these states that are getting thousands of immigrants a day. So he gets a couple of bus loads and suddenly we're at a breaking point. Well, what do you think Texas is right now? And again, we don't share a border with Mexico, so we're not undergoing the same kind of things going on here. And as they're shipping them out, well, the government's been doing that for quite a long time. County Executive Rob Astorino saw them coming into a Westchester airport over a year ago. Mm-hmm. This is the government doing it, not Texas, not Florida. So, at what point do you have to stand up, and when you declare yourself a sanctuary city or a sanctuary state, what do you think that meant at the end of the day? Well, it's easy for him to point fingers at these states.
That was Newsmax. Back in a minute.
Thank you. And this is from Twitter, but from C-SPAN. A reporter asks John Kirby about his role at the White House. Quote, "Sometimes you act like a second press secretary. Almost everywhere I go, I have black people telling me that the reason you're at the White House is to undermine the first female black press secretary." John Kirby on his role at the White House. Quote, "If anyone gets any kind of idea in their head that I'm taking any work from Karine or her work, that's really regrettable. I'm simply working at the National Security Council on national security communications." So, and I read this because I want to take every opportunity I possibly can to embarrass or play up embarrassments of the Biden administration. And when this question was asked, there's a video clip with it, and the John, or whatever his name is, was clearly embarrassed by the question. So anytime I get a chance to or an opportunity to play that up, I want to take it. And I want to do so not because this is a best practice overall. If we were doing things the best way, then we would be having more intelligent and debates, Oxford style, etc. But that's not the way the left wants to play it. And unfortunately, they're gonna, if we play it straight, they're gonna always play it deuces wild. So I think it is, if the left is going to go ahead and use rhetoric as a weapon, then we can and should do likewise. Back in a minute.
Thank you. And now, Governor Ron DeSantis.
I also was a little bit perplexed when I heard that the president is scrambling to get his cabinet together to try to address the fact that you have governors who are helping to relocate illegal aliens to sanctuary cities. He didn't scramble to get his cabinet together when we had millions of people illegally pouring across the southern border. He didn't scramble to get his cabinet together when you had 53 migrants die in some trailer in Texas because they were neglected by the federal government. You didn't see him scramble to get his cabinet together when we had Americans that were victimized by criminal aliens that he led across the border. You didn't see him scramble to get his cabinet together when we hit record fentanyl deaths, which that fentanyl is coming across his open border. It's only when you have 50 illegal aliens end up in a very wealthy, rich sanctuary enclave that he decides to scramble on this. And so I think what we are doing... what we're continuing to do is use every tool at our disposal to insulate the state of Florida from the negative ramifications of his reckless border policies. And yes, that involves helping with transport. It involves suing on catch and release, which we have done. It's involved making sure that contractors are held accountable if they're facilitating this into our state. And we have a statewide grand jury that's looking at different types of practices that may be going on in the state that's exacerbating the problem. And so, the end of the day, this is a massive policy failure by the president. This is a massive and intentional policy that is causing huge amount of damage all across the country, and it's all rooted in a failure to take care that the laws are faithfully executed and to fulfill his oath of office. And so instead of scrambling and worrying about a bunch of rich people and having 50, and oh, by the way, they already bust them out. They're gone. They said we want everyone, no one's illegal, and they're gone within 48 hours. And so why not actually look at what's going on? There were more Acela corporate journalists in Martha's Vineyard today than have ever gone down to the southern border to look what's going on. Why don't you go down there and look what some of those communities have to deal with every day?
Governor Ron DeSantis. Back in a minute.
Thank you. So I'm listening to KFI, and they have a news report about the monarchy in Britain and the funeral, etc., for Queen Elizabeth, and somebody had written a sign that says "Not my king" and whatnot, and so they were hustled away by the police, and somebody had said that it's a brave person to come out and with signs that say "Abolish the monarchy" at this particular time. That's a lie. Don't be fooled. That kind of thing used to fool me too, where I'd say, "Oh yeah, wow, what a bold protester." No, there's a time and a place for everything. This is a time and a place for grieving and for mourning, not for self-aggrandizement, and that's all that is. If they want to go out and say "Down with the monarchy," wait until, I think it's a 10-day mourning period. They can wait. Wait for 10 days. Then after that, then you can go out and say, go back to saying whatever you want. But until then, show some courtesy, show some respect to everyone else in the country, and keep your mouth shut. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now an article in the American Conservative magazine, and it's called "Ron DeSantis, Travel Agent." So now we're going to have a big argument over whether or not Governor Ron DeSantis was right to fly plane loads of illegal immigrants to Martha's Vineyard. I think he was, but I'm getting huge pushback on that from some of my friends and my Bernie bro son. My dad must be up in heaven laughing his butt off watching me argue with my righteous liberal college student son. I put him through the same thing when I was the same age as my boy. God love him. The basic objection seems to be that DeSantis made political pawns out of these people. My argument is that he and Texas Governor Greg Abbott are trying to make liberal elites understand the cost of their easy compassion. It's like this. I'd say that DeSantis has made his point for exactly the reason that David Marcus identifies. He has made the liberals understand, in a way they haven't before, what their cost-free compassion actually costs people like those who live in Del Rio. Remember this declaration from the mayor of Washington, D.C.? Washington, D.C. is a sanctuary city. We protect the rights and humanity of all our residents, and our D.C. values and our local culture are guided by a celebration of diversity and inclusivity. Governor Abbott has been honoring Mayor Bowser's desire to open the city's arms to illegal migrants by shipping them to D.C., but it turns out that, for some reason, liberal D.C. politicians don't actually want illegals to take sanctuary there. This D.C. council member once celebrated the city as a sanctuary. Brianna Nadeau, quote, "I am deeply troubled by reports that ICE conducted an action in Adams Morgan this past weekend that resulted in 2 parents being brought into custody and separated from their teenage children. These actions tear our families apart and sow deep trust in law enforcement." And then further, quote, "The district is a sanctuary city, which means our law enforcement does not cooperate with ICE. As council member, I have called for an abolition of ICE and wrote D.C.'s law to establish a permanent immigrant legal services fund." But now, she complains that the governors of Texas and Arizona have turned the sanctuary city into a border town. Nadeau was thrilled to be a sanctuary city when it didn't cost much, but not now. Greg Abbott did it again, this time at VP Harris's home. Why? Again, to make an important point. Quote, our supposed border czar, Vice President Kamala Harris, has yet to even visit the border to see firsthand the impact of the open border policies she has helped implement. Abbott said in a press release. Texas will continue sending migrants to sanctuary cities like Washington, D.C. until President Biden and border czar Harris step up and do their jobs. Quote, the border is secure, Harris insisted to meet the press host Chuck Todd in a recent interview. Some critics say that DeSantis et alia are owning the libs at the expense of desperate human beings. Well, those desperate human beings are in far less danger of being dumped in a fancy liberal resort town than at any other point in their journey from their home countries in which they chose to break the laws of the United States to enter. There are plenty of people near the borders of America who are tired of bearing the burden, financial and otherwise, of open illegal immigration. Nothing meaningful has been done about the problem as long as that burden has been concentrated in a few border states. Now those states' governors are trying something new to compel liberals to understand what they've been dealing with. I see nothing wrong with that. It is a standard and well-founded conservative complaint that liberal elites support policies that give them the warm, fuzzy feeling of virtue while imposing the costs on others. Equity programs are like this. Rich and upper middle class white kids always find a way of getting taken care of, while middle and working class white and Asian kids, among others, find themselves shut out of jobs and educational positions. Also, liberal elites can feel good about themselves. The whole time I was working in newspapers, I saw lots of liberal white upper management types swoon over diversity initiatives that sought to hire people on the basis of skin color, but I never once saw one of these do-gooder white liberals resign to offer their position to a person of color. This is the kind of thing that the conservatives resent. As I've said in this space before, when I lived in Dallas, a city, like the whole state, was receiving a tidal wave of illegal immigrants, the cost on the public schools and public health system was massive. Liberal do-gooders who welcomed all the migrants saw them as opportunities for conspicuous compassion, as well as a source of cheap labor. These liberals didn't see all the poor and working class people, white, black, and Latino, in the region who had to pay the direct costs of the high influx of illegals in having public schools swamped by children who spoke no English and therefore held up the education of native kids, and in having public hospitals overwhelmed by illegal migrants seeking health care. And then there's the crime and the devaluing of property in neighborhoods where mass migrants settle. In 2003, not long after I arrived in Dallas, I went out to the inner ring suburb of Irving to talk to some neighbors, including a man who immigrated illegally from Mexico decades earlier, who were losing their quiet family neighborhood to houses filled with male laborers from Latin America renting from absentee landlords. I went to the code inspector's office at the city of Irving to find out why the city's inspectors were allowing this to happen. They weren't interested in doing any inspecting outside of office hours. If the illegal number of renters stayed away from the house during office hours, they were fine. This one local man I talked to said that when he came home from work and saw the SWAT team having blocked off the street to deal with a problem at that house, he decided that it was time to sell his place and get his family out of there. The local government, he correctly concluded, had no interest in solving this problem, and neither did the feds. So to those who say that the conservatives like DeSantis treat illegal immigrants as political pawns, I say that so do liberal do-gooders when they refuse to grapple with the very real costs of mass illegal migration. I'm grateful that these red state governors are giving the good people of Martha's Vineyard a chance to show their compassion and increase the diversity of their enclave. Because as we know, diversity is our strength. Why should Del Rio, Texas, have a monopoly on virtue? And that was an article from the American Conservative magazine, and it's called Ron DeSantis, Travel Agent. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now news snippets. From the Washington Times, China slams U.S. Senate bill supporting Taiwan's defense. The Street, retail sales bounced higher in August but were capped by hotter-than-expected inflation pressures. The Washington Times, inside the ring, Xi arrives in Central Asia, plans talks with Putin. Newsmax. Baltimore prosecutors ask a judge on Wednesday to vacate Adnan Syed's conviction for the 1999 murder of Hai-Min Lee, a case that was chronicled in the hit podcast Serial. Newsmax. 6 Republican senators have introduced a bill to ban Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi from entering the United States to attend the United Nations General Assembly meeting, which runs through September 27th. Washington Examiner. Criminal justice reform activists may not care, but crime almost always hurts minorities the most. That is true in San Francisco. As it turns out, residents want crime to be prevented and criminals sent to jail. Media Research Center. No, let's go to Stars and Stripes. Girl reported to a school counselor last week that she was raped and abused by a Nellis Air Force officer. The Federalist. Exclusive document indicates special counsel failing to bring collusion hoaxers to justice. The Squawk Box. Look at what TikTok's able to do with its data that it collects from so many users, says Senator Tom Cotton. It's simply not safe and not prudent to allow a Chinese company to manufacture these components for systems that may make it into the hands of Americans. Washington Examiner. Florida Governor DeSantis sends 2 planes with migrants to Martha's Vineyard. Washington Times. Trump endorsed Deal, D-I-E-H-L, ready to extend GOP winning streak in Massachusetts governor's race. Newsmax. Marsha Blackburn, quote, Joe Biden has time to have a party at the White House. He has time to go drive cars in Detroit. But he doesn't have time to work on the issue of crime, which is plaguing our cities, unquote. Molly Hemingway. Democrats are destroying American rule of law in their deranged obsession of politically targeting one man. Horrific to see how their corrosive hatred is causing such threats to our great republic. Washington Examiner. President Joe Biden and Democrats losing grip on Hispanic voters. And the Washington Times. House Dems accused of bogus investigation into public relations firms for the oil and gas industry. Back in a minute.
Thank you. And now, Dr. Peter Kreeft.
Before I actually give you my commencement address, I'd like to sell it to you by telling you that it's going to be mercifully short. Since our plethora of technological time-saving devices have robbed us of leisure time nowadays, I will do you the charitable deed of saving you a little time by summarizing in one short speech what thousands of other commencement speakers have been telling you for the last generation or two. I want to say 10 uncomfortable things about 10 comfortable ideas that they say you need to cultivate. Identity, self-esteem, service to the world, creativity, critical thinking, peace, justice, openness, love, and freedom. These are 10 nice, happy-faced words. But unlike most commencement speakers, I will not tell you happy lies about them. First, a word about lies. It's a well-known platitude, especially in economics departments, that there are 3 kinds of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. As they also say, figures don't lie, but liars figure. But I think that principle should be expanded. I think there are 4 kinds of lies: lies, damned lies, statistics, and commencement addresses. I think most commencement addresses were inspired by the inventor of advertising, which is the world's oldest profession, the one that was invented in the Garden of Eden by a shapeshifter with many names, some of which are Beelzebub, Mephistopheles, Ashtaroth, Baal, and Satan. The first product of his advertising was an apple. An icon of that product with the bite taken out of it is proudly displayed on many of his products today. He has chutzpah because these are labels that shamelessly say "made in hell." His partner in sadism is Bill Gates, author of the world's cleverest torture chamber, Microsoft Word.
There are many moments that make home sweet home. Some you plan, others just happen.
Our Lord promised that the gates of hell would not prevail against Peter, son of Jonas, but he did not promise that the hell of gates would not prevail against Peter, son of Kreeft. The word advertising is itself an advertisement. It's a weasel word. It's a euphemism for lying. For no man-made product could ever be successfully sold to this ship of fools by simply telling the truth. Most people think that the world's oldest profession is prostitution, but that's only one form of advertising. I know something about this form of advertising, for my job is to be an intellectual prostitute. That is, a college professor. I don't sell my body for money. Nobody'd buy that. But I do sell my mind. Boston College is my pimp. Students pay my pimp, it's called tuition, and my pimp pays me, it's called salary. That's what Socrates would say. The business I work for is brains for hire, that's why it's called higher education. But today, there has been a miracle. I have been rendered incapable of lying for one day, just like Jim Carrey in the hilariously funny movie Liar, Liar. So I can lie today only if I tell the truth about lies. And therefore I will give you 10 common, comfortable lies that my fellow advertisers and prostitutes have been telling you for many years in their commencement speeches. Lie number 1 is that you can be whatever you want to be. Well, that's not true even for God. He can't be the devil even if he wanted to be. Good cannot be evil, and evil cannot be good. There is indeed a little good in the worst of us, and a little bad in the best of us, so that it ill becomes the best of us to speak ill of the worst of us. But there is not a little evil in goodness itself, or a little good in evil itself, because nothing can be what it is not. That's the law of non-contradiction, than which nothing more certain can ever be thought, except by a deconstructionist. So this popular self-contradiction is, well, self-contradictory. Or if it's altered into something that is logically possible and changed into you can become anything you want to become, well, it's still a lie, because if it were not a lie, I guarantee you I would have become the greatest left-handed relief pitcher in the history of baseball. Hobbits cannot become wizards, only better or worse hobbits. Men cannot become women, only better or badder men. You cannot make yourself immortal. You can't even make yourself a saint. Only God can do that, though you can let him do it. But since we are essentially temporal creatures, that cannot be done instantly, only gradually, because nothing can escape from its own essential nature. And when it tries to do that, it becomes both comic and tragic. And as all our great dramatists have perceived, human life in this world is indeed a tragicomedy. Lie number 2 is what I think is the most seductively satanic sentence I have ever heard. And it was the theme song of a TV show for small children back in the 70s called The Electric Company. The song went like this: "The most important person in the whole wide world is you." In other words, God, how dare you to sit on my throne? That was the essence of Satan's philosophy and the motivation for his rebellion. As John Milton sagely said, Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. In fact, whenever we worship ourselves, we make hell. God does not make hell, we do. The song everyone sings as they enter hell is, "I did it my way." When I was a kid, way back in the Jurassic Age, perhaps once every few years, some crazy man would make the news by killing dozens of strangers in public for no reason at all. Nowadays, that happens every few days. What has made the difference? Well, when I was a little kid, we didn't listen to the electric company. I can't think of a better way than that philosophy to raise a generation of psychopaths. Some of these little kids grow up to be psychologists. I actually heard a psychologist once say that Hitler's problem was that he didn't have enough self-esteem. He'd probably say the same thing about Satan. A good friend of mine swears that he heard a Catholic priest say in an Easter Sunday sermon that, and I quote word for word, "The message that Christ was trying to preach to the world from his pulpit of the cross on Good Friday was, 'I'm okay, you're okay.'" This makes me angry because I love comedy, and such people put satirical comedians like Monty Python out of business. When satire has become identical with reality, there's nothing left to satire. Line number 3 is a sweeter version of the previous lie. It is that the world needs you, that you can save the world, or at least Western civilization, or America, or the culture. You are the Messiah. When you ride into Jerusalem in triumph, you will need an animal to ride on. And the donkey is very preferable to the elephant, and certainly preferable to the lamb, but the real party animal is the jackass. Mother Teresa once said to Malcolm Muggeridge, the brilliant and cynical British journalist who had become a Christian but not yet a Catholic, "Malcolm, you're a good man. Why don't you go all the way and become a Catholic?" Malcolm replied, "Well, to answer you in your own words, Mother, I guess God sees that I'm a good man and he needs some good men outside his church as well as inside." And then Mother Teresa uttered 3 words. "No, he doesn't." And Malcolm writes in his autobiography, "I could not answer that argument, so I became a Catholic." Nobody ever won an argument with Mother Teresa, except God. Line number 4 is that you need education in creative thinking, interpreted as thinking that creates a new reality, a new world. This ability logically follows from your newly discovered divine identity. And this is why you are encouraged to be spiritual but not religious. After all, you've just discovered your divine identity, and God is not religious because religion is the worship of God as an other. And God is also spiritual, not material. So, if you've discovered your divine identity, what you need is not God's incarnation, but your excarnation, your spirituality. The devil is very spiritual. So you can create your own world. It is you, not God, who can say, "Behold, I make all things new." You are the creator of truth, not its discoverer and servant. That old superstition of objective truth is oppressive, and that's an objective truth. Line number 5 is that you also need education in critical thinking, which means not the search for any positive truth, but a negative skepticism towards anything that claims to be truth. Except, of course, that truth, which you yourself have created with your own creative thinking. In other words, don't believe any dogma. I dogmatically assure you of that. All truth claims must be deconstructed, except that one. Remember your teacher and your patron, Pontius Pilate, who defined truth with that sacred word, whatever. No building may stand in the way of your deconstructive demolition ball, especially a cathedral. One of Karl Marx's favorite quotations from Mephistopheles in Goethe's Faust is, Everything that exists deserves to perish. Chilling. Lie number 6 is the lie of a spiritual pacifism. According to this notion of peace, all peace is good, including peace with the world, the flesh, and the devil. Our only enemies are those who speak of enemies, as the Bible does 272 times. I counted in Strong's Concordance. We must be tolerant of everything except intolerance. When anyone comes calling, even the devil, we must accompany him and welcome him and open the door and invite him to dialogue, exactly as Eve did. But the devil won't dialogue with you if you also invite St. Michael the Archangel or the Blessed Virgin Mary. They are warriors and therefore evil. You see, if all peace is good, then all war is bad, including the war against greed, lust, and pride, the war against the world, the flesh, and the devil, the war against sin. Because that assumes that there is such a thing as sin, and that assumption is sinful and intolerably intolerant, and you must judge that as being judgmental. The only thing that's really evil is to believe that there really is a thing called evil. There is no devil. You have no enemies. Stop fighting and come dine with me, says the spider to the fly. Your religion is simply escapism. But think, who condemns escapism? Jailers. Think about that. Line number 7 is about peace and justice, the slogan that summarizes the most popular and successful modern version of the reduction of Christianity to secularism. Christianity is a radically different and distinctive and surprising and controversial thing, but everyone is for peace and justice. So if Christianity can be reduced to peace and justice, it becomes as controversial as warm milk. Did you ever hear the slogan, "Give war a chance"? An especially popular lie is the coupling of peace and justice by the popular slogan, "If you want peace, seek justice." In other words, if you can't deny the very existence of your enemies, as our previous lie recommended, then at least don't forgive them. Demand justice and nothing more. See how successful that philosophy has been for both sides in Palestine for the last 74 years. And remember to demand justice from God at the Last Judgment so that you can get what you deserve, which is not that escapist fantasy called heaven. Line number 8 is the exaltation of openness and welcoming and tolerance as the supreme good, as the summum bonum, the end of ends. If this philosophy is practiced consistently, your mind will become so open that all your brains will spill out. An open mind is an excellent means, but a bad end. It's like an open mouth. If it's used as a means to eating food, some nourishing food might enter it, and then it will close on that food and eat it and be nourished by it. The name of that food is truth. But if that openness is treated as an end in itself, then your mind and your mouth will never close, but will stay open all the time. And then you will never eat anything, and you will die. And also, flies will enter that always open mouth, and they will deposit maggots in your mouth. And the Lord of the Flies will do the same thing to your soul. Lie number 9 is that all you need is love, sweet love. In other words, you don't need truth, whatever that is. You just need love, whatever that is. Remember that sacred word, whatever. And of course, you don't need discrimination between truth and lies, or between true love and false love. All discrimination is evil, especially the discrimination between good and evil. Sweet love clearly refers to love as a feeling. And as Obi-Wan Kenobi says to Luke Skywalker, trust your feelings, Luke. As Debbie Boone sang, it can't be wrong if it feels so right. That was exactly what Hitler thought. Lie number 10 is the exaltation of freedom as an end rather than a means. For if freedom were a means, that would mean that we would have to ask the question, freedom for what end? What is the true end? This is the sweet land of liberty. But liberty for what? For the name of our new deity, whatever. Viktor Frankl wrote that we ought to balance the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor by having another statue, a statue of responsibility in San Francisco Bay. But that would violate our new 10 commandments, which forbid only being judgmental, repressive, dogmatic, intolerant, uncompassionate, unfeeling, insensitive, narrow-minded, hypocritical, and fundamentalist, our new obscene F word. Well, I'm finished. I fully expect to be charged with hate speech for this talk. And if you, too, oppose these lies, you may also receive hate. For cavities hate dentists, and cancers hate radiation, and cockroaches hate flashlights, and demons hate truth. But love cannot stop warring against hate, and light cannot stop warring against darkness, as you see every time you light a candle in a dark room. And that little experiment is a clue about what is inevitably bound to happen in the end. No matter how smoky and stinky and slimy the darkness is, it cannot endure the light. However successful the darkness may be, for however long a time, and however it may increase, and however many more times we continue to lose every battle in the culture war, yet the light is imperishable. All lies die. Truth alone remains. So there's my commencement address then. It wasn't very long. Its positive point is very simple. Just go forth and preach the truth, the good news, by both word and deed, and then let the chips fall as they may. And please remember Mother Teresa's life-changing and liberating principle. God did not put you in this world to be successful. He put you in this world to be faithful.
And that was Dr. Peter Kreeft. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. Until next time, remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.